Hello, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon if you're in the US. Welcome and good morning if you're in Australia or in New Zealand. Welcome to Safari Talks. Today is episode number 2. Today's episode is really talking about wildlife photography. And we've brought in 3 particular people that we think are the best suited to interact and talk to us, and very passionate about the subject and have a lot to do with it, ranging anything from the last 25 years to the last 30 years. But first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Beks Ndlovu. I'm the CEO of African Bush Camps. I founded the business 15 years ago, so this is our 16th year in operation, and we're very excited, operating in 3 countries, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Zambia. And we want to bring to your lounge, particularly this evening, some interesting facts about photography and share a little bit about all our passions and what it is that we do. So first of all, I want to introduce you to our panel. So the first person I want to introduce you to, and hopefully he can maintain his internet connection, is Calvet Nkomo, who's been guiding for the last 25 years. In fact, he was one of the guys that inspired me to join the industry. He's one of the first few guys that I met before I trained myself as a professional guide. So Calvet Nkomo is currently based in Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe. And he's probably sitting under a tree at the best possible signal in order to connect and be with us this evening. So hopefully his internet connection will light up for him. So he'll join us shortly, but I'll also introduce you to a longtime friend, Craig Riggs, who is the founder and editor, publisher of Travel Africa magazine. He's been at it since 1997. And in fact, I think if I remember correctly, Craig, you were one of the first magazines that really specialized in travel to Africa and really promoting with a passion travel to the different parts of Africa. So well done for staying the long and being in the long run, and we look forward to hearing a lot more from you. And of course, our superstar Marlon, he's a professional photographer and co-founded his own business in photography, which he'll tell you about shortly, called Wild Eye. And you can definitely see his passion really beaming and shining through in his photography as he travels to different parts of Africa. But in particular, he seems to have taken a bit of a shine for Zimbabwe and particularly for Manapul. So hopefully he'll expand a little bit and tell us why the bias towards that part of the world and what's really makes him tick. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And if you will please allow the audience to learn a little bit about you, perhaps starting with Calvet, you can give us a little bit of an intro about what it is that makes you tick.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Calvet. I'm a guide working for Somalisa, African Bush Camp. I started guiding in 1995, and I've been guiding for 25 years. I joined ABC 2013, and I'm so grateful to work for ABC. Why? This company was started by a professional guide like me, Beks. So I want to see this company being the best company. So, you know, it's the camp or the company for the guides, because it was started by a guide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Calvet. And certainly your passion is seen by so many people that talk about you. The first thing they say is that, we met Calvet, and particularly recently, we've been talking quite a lot about social distancing, and I believe you've adapted your model of guiding about the practical, safe distance that we need to distance ourselves from the wildlife. So it's really good to see the work that you're doing there with such great enthusiasm and passion. So thank you very much. Craig?
So I grew up in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, and traveling overseas when I was younger. And then I guess we started the magazine in 1997 to address misperceptions of Africa at the time, some of which still hold true, offer reassurance where it was necessary, but also to try and widen the scope in the understanding of this continent. It's so diverse, so large, and there's so much to do. And yeah, we just wanted to get stuck in and share the Africa that we love, you know. So, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's chat, because I think imagery is such an important part of telling Africa's story, and certainly in the magazine, it's one of our big challenges. And so I'm really keen to hear what Marlon and you guys have got to say.
Great, thanks very much, Craig. You really are to be commended for the passion in which you've really put Africa out there. And certainly the one thing that's been encouraging is to, over the years, see how much your photography continues just to improve in your magazine. I should imagine that those images are the things that capture people's imaginations, and it's very important for you to have your people, your journalists telling the story as it is, but also being able to highlight and express the essence of Africa through your photography. So thank you very much for really being an advocate for the continent. And Marlon, over to you.
Thank you, Beks. Thank you for having me. It's a massive privilege to be a part of this discussion and to be a part of the African Bush Camps family. I think at least that's the way it feels. So as Beks mentioned, my name is Marlon du Toit. I am a professional wildlife photographer, safari guide, and I travel the continent. I travel to quite a few different destinations, ranging as far north as Kenya, even Central African Republic, all the way down south to South Africa. I get to do so because of a company that I co-own called Wild Eye Destinations. We do mainly photographic safaris, but also privately guided tours. And I've definitely, as Beks mentioned, developed a keen passion and love for mana pools. And the first time I visited was back in 2012 with a good friend of mine. And we only spent 5 days in the park, drove all the way up from South Africa. I think it was about 4 or 5 days there and back. And I've never looked back since then. That place took a big chunk of my heart. And I'll definitely tell you more about that pretty soon. Thanks, Beks.
Great, guys. Thank you very much for that intro of all of you. Yeah, so I mean, before we really get stuck into some questions, I think we're seeing it more and more now that, you know, camera equipment is getting so much more accessible. I mean, growing up as a kid, we never had cameras, and as a result, I hardly have images of myself as a kid. But these days, you know, everybody's got a camera. People's phones are cameras. And so people are really quite keen to see what they can get the best out of whatever gadget they might have. And most of them are really affordable. But what we find more and more is that people are coming on safari, maybe with a new bit of kit. They like to get a few tips here and there as to what to do, how to use them, what lenses to bring out. And I mean, Marlon, you're pretty much, you know, in the cover of that with your guests that you bring out in safari. You really are there to support them and guide them so that they can maximize and optimize the equipment that they have. So perhaps the first question is, you know, Africa. People ask me all the time, Beks, what's the best time to come to Africa? And I say, well, actually, you need to come to Africa 4 times at least, because you'll see different faces of Africa. And sometimes you go to the same place twice and you won't actually recognize it. But predominantly, I would say that we have 2 seasons. We have a green season. So it's raining, everything is lush green. It's baby season. There's a hype of activity, even though there's a perception that you'll see less. I believe you see the same quality, and there's a lot more happening. There's babies being born. The bush is really at its best, and the wildlife is thriving. It's at its best. So Marlon, why don't you maybe talk to us a little bit about, in your opinion, what the difference is in your photography between the green season and the dry season?
Sure, it's a very good question, Beks, because it's something that I try to promote as well. Because there seems to be a heavy, I guess, misconception that it's only better in the dry season, and it's a season that wildlife photographers tend to overexploit. And without a doubt, it is a magnificent time to visit. I think it's from an action point of view, from a drastic storytelling point of view. I think the dry season is an eye-opening experience. The people, especially a first-time visitor, the scenes you kind of get told of Africa is that of green pastures and long, tall grasses, and you know, so you have this picture in your mind, And when you arrive in Africa or any of these kind of landscapes, especially Southern Africa, during the dry season, you're met by barren soils and empty water holes and animals that are a little bit skinnier. But I think in that lies a great story to be told. And it certainly is a place where you can predict animal behavior a little bit better. You can search out water holes and find that animals come to water holes daily. The rivers are a hive of activity, as you've well seen in Mana Pools, with the Zambezi River just drawing so many animals, because it's the one thing they simply cannot go without. So certainly the dry season presents an opportunity for a wildlife photographer and anyone really keen on some condensed game viewing experiences to find animals around something like a good water source, being a artificial water hole on some of the reserves that we get to visit, or a main river. There's a level of consistency, but the thing that you lack is like you described, is color. And that's something I love, and something I'm seeing more and more often is people getting to visit in the green season or the emerald season. And there's fantastic places to go to, and the sights you get to see, not only the wildlife and especially baby animals and the colors, but also birds. You get to hear birds like never before. You know, it's one thing you come during the dry season and people often are like, I thought there'd be more birds. But then you tell them you come in the green season, and there'll be twice the number of birds because of summer visitors, and so that there's a certain level of life. And it certainly makes things, I think, a little bit more challenging during the late green season when the grasses are tall and, you know, you're looking for something like a leopard. I think all of us, I think, have tried to find a leopard or follow a leopard in tall grass, and it's near impossible. But with that said, some of my favorite memories and photographs come out of the green season and summertime. If you think of just the skies, you get clouds and you get lightning, and you get sometimes these beautiful dark blue rainfall clouds with the sun shining on a beautiful dead leadwood, and you get this beautiful contrast. So I think there's massive advantage to both, and it's like you said, you can't really fault either season, because unless you've been there, that's what you've got to do. You've got to come see it in the green, and you certainly would more than likely have seen it in the dry season. But so yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing to see both seasons in Africa. And there's Hwange in the green season, I've been in summer, like early summer. My goodness, you cannot believe the change. Calvet, I'm sure you would have seen that, how that place, you've gone in October and you go in December or January, you feel like you're on another game reserve. You cannot believe the difference. Flowers and green and waterholes and kites and storks, and it doesn't feel like the same place. So there's merit to both, certainly.
Well, that's excellent. You know, I hadn't touched my camera, Marlon, for probably about 12 years. In fact, I'd say my photographer, since running camp, is reduced to taking photographs close up of people, of bathrooms and bedrooms.
I've seen it. You get selfies. Your selfie gets strong, big.
But recently, I did a trip to the Congo and to Central African Republic, and I actually got inspired to get back into photography. So I'm back in the game, and I'm very excited. But I'm pretty sure that you're right. People like Calvet, Calvet experiences Africa 12 months of the year, both in green season, dry season, and he consistently supplies us with just the most amazing photographs and captions of what's actually happening and what him and his guests are doing. Calvet, do you have a particular favorite time of the year, or do you just sort of roll with whatever is presented to you?
Well, Beks, I sometimes answer this question. If the guests ask me which is the best season to be in Hwange or to be in a safari, I always answer this way. I say the best season is the time when you are here. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
it depends. You can be in a safari in summer or in dry season. Well, the green season has its own beauty and the dry season has its own beauty. So I would say both. But the difference is that the green season, of course, the background, the scenery, it's just amazing. like Marlon has said. And again, like the birds, like palliative migrants, inter-African migrants, there'll be lots of birds. If you are a birder, I would say the best season you come in green season. Then if you want to see more game in one particular spot, you come in dry season. I would say again, the green season for the predators, elephants will be spreading, buffaloes will be spreading, and you find that lions will follow buffaloes, and then elephants will be drinking everywhere. There will be natural water everywhere. Then it gives chance to predators like cheetah, wild dogs to be in the area in the green season. So that's how I view the green season and the dry season, because I spend the whole time in the bush, January to December, the whole year.
Thanks very much, Calvet. And these are the different colorful faces, I think, that are so interesting about Africa, is the different seasons. And as much as the seasons, I think, are also quite different and fascinating, I'm pretty sure, Marlon, that you've seen a tremendous difference in photography, even in the sort of light between East Africa and Southern Africa. Depending on where you are, you also have a lot more open vistas open plains in East Africa. So that kind of changes the mood of the photography. I'm pretty sure that our audience in time will be asking questions of, is the photography different between East Africa and Southern Africa? But we'll look forward to the audience presenting us with some questions. But Craig, over to you. What would you say about your magazine? I mean, I'm also quite keen probably for you to dive a little bit into what inspired Travel Africa as a magazine. But do you have photographic competitions in that magazine that you run at specific times? Or, I mean, how do you work your photography? If people want to contribute to your magazine, how do you filter through that? Because I'm sure you must get so many people, especially amateurs like myself, coming to you and wanting to contribute, but not quite the same standard as Marlon or any one of the other photographers that you use. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
I'd love to contribute, Craig, if that's...
It's interesting. Since we started working together, Beks, about 20 years ago, the way that we do our picture selection has changed dramatically, because technology, now everybody has capability to take great photographs. And so our challenge with the mag, you've got such a wide variety of pictures to choose from, but how do you distill into a story of 6 pages and choose just a couple of pictures that can tell that story and really capture everything you're trying to tell in that scene? And so I guess we find where we used to choose pictures more based on a sort of technical capability, as in focus, that sort of thing. Now it's much more about the impact of an image, how many stories you can tell in one picture. And that, I guess, question for Marlon, but also for Calvet, as guides, I guess you have the advantage of understanding wildlife behavior, which gives you a bit of a heads up. So if you can anticipate what an animal's going to do and maybe get in the right position, that gives you a bigger chance. So readers and people listening who are coming on safari, who are stuck in a game drive vehicle, perhaps on foot, what are the tips that you would give them that you as guides can bring to help them just elevate their pictures from really good snaps to actually, stand out wildlife images?
That's great, Craig. So before we go into that, Marlon, and I think that's a very good answer, a very good question there. If we can split that, the answering of that into 2 things, maybe Calvet, you can speak a little bit into, what is your experience of what would you advise? Let's say I was jumping in the back of your vehicle right now. What would be your brief advice on what I need to do and what are the behaviors that I must be conscious of, my own behaviors that I must be conscious of in order to maximize and get the best photographs? And remember, you're talking to an amateur. And then Marlon, maybe you can speak a little bit into, in your opinion, what do you think are the best activities where you've got some of the best interactions with wildlife, and have been able to capture that on camera. Calvet, do you want to shoot first?
Yes, Beks. You know what? These meetings that we have as guides end of the year at Somalisa, sometimes, you know, we invite the professional photographers. We learn a lot from there about photography, like how to change aperture, how to change ISO, and as well as positioning your vehicle with the object or subject. Also, the light as well. We consider light as well. Where do you position your vehicle? So as an amateur, I find out, do you know how to take pictures? Because some of them, they come on a safari and with their new equipment, they haven't even used it. So you have to check if, they are versed with using their cameras, and then from there, that's when you can help them so that they can take good pictures. Yeah, that's what I can say. I'm not a professional photographer, but through professional, people who come to Somalisa to our guides training, and then I got it from there. And also, I'm also keen. I'm a keen photographer, so I always take picture, and from there, that's when I get to know exactly how can I position my guest, how can I help my guest, and I learn from there. So that's what I have about photography.
Thanks very much, Calvet. Marlon, do you want to add to that and maybe address give us your input on what you think are the activities that you found people can partake in that will give them the best use out of their photography in capturing the most idyllic image?
Yeah, Bex, you know, it's an interesting question, and you know, we get a lot of guests on safari. So I deal with a situation quite often where people come on safari, and day one, it's the first day that they pick up their camera. So fantastic to raise that point, Calvet. And it's often quite frustrating. Now, I'm in this industry not to take pretty pictures. I'm in this industry to create experiences for guests, and hopefully after a 6, 8, or 12-day safari, they leave with their lives changed. Now, if you are stuck behind your camera, and this is a good tip for everyone listening, if you're stuck behind your camera 24/7, and you're just looking at through the viewfinder or at the menu, and you're trying to dial in settings, and it becomes frustrating, then what you'll find is it negatively impacts on the game viewing experience that you're having, and it becomes frustrating because where a lion hunt, let's say you're watching a pride of lions in Hwange, and they're on the hunt and they're after a giraffe, and they sprint away and they catch the giraffe, and it's this incredible sequence of events. And all you ended up doing was trying to get the aperture set, and your shutter speed was too slow, so the photograph is out of focus, or your composition was wrong. You know, by the end of that thing, you'll look up and you'll be like, oh man, you know, I messed it up completely and I didn't get the shot. But what you actually should be saying is like, jaw drop, that was amazing. Look what I just got to witness. But the challenge is if you're not prepared as a photographer, I'm not talking about being a professional photographer, knowing everything and being able to get the shot. But if you come prepared on a trip, and if you, that's why the stuff that we do where we guide guests on these tours, you know, I'm on hand and I'm like, guys, f6.3, ISO 400, underexposed by 2/3, get ready, get that lens, you know, so I'm prepping you. But if you're not in that position, if you just take a little bit of time, we encourage all our guests to photograph your dogs before you come out on safari. Get your dogs in the garden, get them running around, play with aperture, play with f-stop. If you've just bought a camera, you know, we've had guests that come on safari with an unboxed camera, and they literally opening it up for the first time 2 hours before the afternoon game drive. It's an absolute nightmare because you are panicked, you don't know a thing, it feels uncomfortable. So, you know, the biggest thing for me is for people to make the most of the photographic experience while you're on safari is just come to grips with your gear before the time. And you don't have to have all the gear, Beks. There's a saying we have, and I don't know if you've heard this, but all the gear and no idea. And that is very, very true. There's people they have got lenses that cost $14,000, the latest camera gear. They get there and they don't even know how to charge the stuff. They don't know where the memory cards go in. And so it doesn't mean because you have the greatest gear that you're going to get the best photograph. So I think it's important to, whether it's entry-level gear, beginner stuff, whether it's intermediate, or whether you're a seasoned veteran, get to know your gear again before you come out on safari. I'm telling you, like after this lockdown, and I don't know when I'm going to get back to the bush, but even I have to keep at it because it feels foreign if you go back for the first time. So I think for me, always remember the experience. For me, it's first and foremost about the experience. And if you're stressing about settings and you're stressing about aperture values and all these things, you're not going to enjoy the experience and you're going to lose out on a life-changing encounter in nature. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, Marlon. And of course, like everything else, we're going to start winding down now. But there's a lot of people out there that are asking some great questions and giving some good comments. And certainly, I think just speaking into the point that you just made about fiddling around with gear and and then lose out on the experience. I mean, just for the audience, and this is something that some people want to know, is there a very simple way to set up your camera to basically cater for any eventuality within a given time?
I wish there was, because that'll make my life a lot easier. Automatic, auto mode. There's you can get away with basics, but the most challenging thing is the animals. I mean, let's face it, what are the animals that we really want to see when we go on safari? Impalas are fantastic. We love them. They're great, always active in good light. And, all these animals are great, but we want lions, we want leopards, we want them active, we want them moving around. You want to see them up and about and playing and hunting. And it's not often that they do that when the light is at its best. It's often a hot day and the lions are lounging about and they only get up at 5:30 and the sun's about to set. So you're dealing with low light. You're dealing with situations where your ISO has to be higher, your f-stop's got to be lower. You got to try and take into account the available light. Maybe a spotlight comes out and that complicates things. So it's difficult to give it a blanket setting. But what I will say is, there's, at the end of the day, there's three and maybe a fourth thing that you need to consider is before you come out, just read up ISO, aperture, shutter speed. That's all. Just if you can get a basic idea of that. You don't need to shoot in manual mode. So I want to bust that myth right now. I don't even shoot in manual mode, full manual mode. And I know very few professional wildlife photographers that do, because it just isn't the way to go for wildlife photography. And that's my opinion. So you don't, that's a big thing, because people, it makes life complicated, and you step into a safari thinking you have to be in manual mode, you're going to screw everything up. So, set yourself up maybe in the beginning, if you're really new to it, like on program mode on your camera, something that gives you a little bit of control, but the camera still helps you out. And then there's things like aperture priority, which, the camera takes care of your shutter speed. It can take care of your ISO, and you just have to change your f-stop. There's ways to do it. But I think if you just have it's not too complicated. If you just have a basic idea of ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, then that will already go a massive way. And then, guys like Calvet and the local guy driving you, they're often fairly well equipped with camera gear, and they know a little bit more than the average guy. Some guys, know quite a bit, and they'll definitely be able to help. I know, I've been guided by a number of guys within African bush camps and mana pools and Hwange and Kanga. And, all the guys are fairly well clued up, definitely enough to help the novice photographer. But as for blanket settings, it's a tough one, man. But I think, a little bit of understanding goes a long way.
No, that's certainly helpful. Craig, why don't you maybe tell us about, your needs as a publisher, and maybe you can add a little bit onto what Marlon has just said. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you look for when you're sieving? Because, you must be having to sieve through thousands of photographs for any one edition. So what are the things that you look for?
We do, and it's really, I had a smile when Marlon was talking about pictures of lions there, because if there's one animal we've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures of, it's lions. And the reality is that most people see lions when they're fast asleep. So it's really difficult to take a picture. So the challenge that we have found, and I kind of put this out, I'm not really a photographer, but having looked at pictures so often, is how can you bring a bit of drama into a picture? How can you tell a story in that portrait? Is it the way that you crop it? Should you zoom in on something else? The claw, for example, something that can show a side of that that's not just a pretty lion portrait. Also, the thing about telling a story is sometimes I think the temptation is to zoom in on animals. If you pull back and get the full landscape, you then get the habitat, you get a direction of travel for the animal, you get a sense of the other wildlife and the scene. And in many ways, you know, what we try and do with the magazine is it's a very tactile, two-dimensional thing, but you want to try and capture the smell and the sounds in a photograph. And I think you can do that when you bring in other elements to a photograph as well. So suddenly, if you've been there before, you think, oh, you know what, I know what it's like at a waterhole.
Yeah,
That's good.
If I can add to that, you know, I had a great chat to one of my favorite photographers on Instagram today. We did a live session, Hannes Lochner, and we spoke about the exact same thing. And there's nothing wrong with a fantastic telephoto lens type of image, and you know, right in on the portrait or the action. But you know, too few photographers look at the bigger picture, and it's something that I encourage everybody to do. And it's the excitement, I think, Craig, that gets the better of you. Sometimes you arrive and you haven't been on safari in a long time. You get to lions on a carcass feeding on something, or a leopard up a tree, and immediately the first thing you do is you reach your brand new 400 f2.8 or 100 400, and you get right in there and you get the eyes and the feet. But what you're missing is the beautiful acacia that the leopard is lying in. Then in the background there might be an elephant herd, and the sky is blue, and you know, so you immediately miss out on everything that's happening around you because you become so fixated on the close thing. And even the storytelling side of it, you know, I love photographing sleeping animals because, like you said, you can sometimes get in closer, or you can tell a story. A story doesn't mean it has to be action or movement. There's a way to tell a story about a sleeping leopard that makes it feel sleepy and emotional and engaged. So, you know, that's the kind of stuff that brings an image to life at the end of the day. So certainly, the story doesn't have to be just a movement or an action or a sequence of events. It could be a sleeping cat or a nudge, one lion nudging the other one. You can tell a beautiful picture and story just by photographing that correctly.
Thank you very much for that. So certainly, I think we need to start winding down now. So I have one last question for probably for both Craig and Marlon. You know, in light of changes, I think that through the current world pandemic, we're going to see quite a lot of changes in behaviors of people, different behaviors in the way of travel. But we're not going to really go into that discussion. What I'm really interested is, you know, in the face of changing technologies, do you think, any of you, that photography, wildlife photography in particular, is going to somewhat change? And if you do think that, is there a particular direction in which you think it will change in light of the speed up of certain technology? I mean, we've already seen the standard SLRs and now the mirrorless cameras, bodies, etc. I mean, those changes may already have come into effect to a large extent, and maybe this will drive them forward, accelerate them going out to market. What do you guys think is going to be the effects of the current crisis on wildlife photography in general?
It's a good question, Beks. Yeah, if I may, you know, I think from my side, just one side of it that I think could be a change is the reason why people travel and what they want to get out of their travel experience for. You know, everyone's been in lockdown and people have been at home and you know, not receiving the best of news. And I think once people get out, it's going to be more than just, or it should be more than just taking a photograph. You know, it's something that I've always been an advocate for, as I mentioned earlier, is the experience of it all. You know, taking it in, and to the extent where perhaps one afternoon we don't do a game drive and look for lions, we go and we watch the sunset and the riverbed with a gin and tonic in hand and listen to the birds and maybe a hyena or a jackal. And I think a big thing will be people being out on safari, capturing the experience, but sharing it. I think that's also a major thing. You know, people will want to tell people where they are, and have people sharing that experience with them, an uplifting message. And in so doing, you know, tell a picture of Africa. Tell us at the moment, it's a lot of it is doom and gloom. But I think once people, especially that initial period, it's important that people capture the experience of it all. I think less people will travel only for the photograph, you know, just to add to their portfolio as per se. But I think it's going to be more to hear, to see, engaging the senses, and then through social media platforms, sharing that with family, friends, and followers back home.
I think I don't know enough about the technical side, Beks, but I think one thing that has already started to change and will continue in the wake of coronavirus is that people will slow down and really appreciate what's going on around them a little bit more. One of the best stories we did recently was actually based at Hwange, at your camp in Mana Pools, where we just had a photographer and a journalist just sitting at the pan overlooking the waterhole all day and just watching and recording what went on. And I think that sort of change of behavior where people sit, absorb, and appreciate it a little bit more will reflect in the photography in terms of the type of images and the range of subject matter that they'll take on.
Thanks very much for that, Craig. And Craig, certainly we look forward to, at African Bush Camps, continuing working with you in trying to shape and tell the stories of Africa through your magazine, Travel Africa. I think the one thing that we certainly are very proud of as a nation is our ability to be able to tell the story. And you're one of the people that has done very well for us as an industry to go out there and tell our story the way as we see it as Africans. So thank you very much, and we'll continue to work with you. Calvet, you're a superstar, and you really do an incredible job. Continue doing what you're doing and inspiring others. You certainly inspired me, so thank you very much for the work that you do out there. And Marlon, we look forward to hosting you and your guests, Calvet and I, and the rest of our colleagues at African Bush Camps, and promoting this continent that we also love and are passionate about. So thanks to you all.
Thank you, Beks. Thanks for the opportunity. And Calvet, I can't wait to see you in Hwange, man. It's going to be good.
That'll be great. I'm waiting for you. Thank you.
One of the best safaris I ever had was at Somalisa, and the green season is fantastic. So take care of it.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yes.
And
we still remain the custodian of